Shocking Greek remains. Is this not the weirdest skull you've ever seen? The skull is adorned with a gold wreath looking like a laurel branch. The flesh may have disintegrated from the human head after 2,500 years buried in the ground, but the gold wreath remained clinging to the white, cracked bone. Inside the mouth of the skull, archaeologists found a silver coin that was used for the afterlife. In Greek mythology, you had to pay the ferryman, or there was no way you were getting into the underworld after you died. Chiron was the name of this dark, silent character, earning a fairly decent wage to ferry the souls of the deceased into the realm of Hades. This skull was recently exhibited at the Agios Nikolaos Museum in Crete. It was discovered inside a cemetery in the ancient city of Lato. The ruins of Lato are about a mile from the small village of Kritsa, which is one of the oldest surviving villages on the island. Nobody knows who the skull belonged to or why it was covered in gold. Wouldn't that be so fancy to have your head decorated in gold foil before your burial? But wait, there's more! This skull wasn't the only weird thing that was recently discovered on the island of Crete. A farmer was working in his olive grove when he stumbled upon an ancient tomb. The tomb contained a pair of coffins and dozens of artifacts that are going to make your jaw drop. I say coffins, but they weren't exactly coffins in the way you might be imagining. Vampires would have had a very difficult time resting inside these coffins. They were more like giant clay vases known as larnags. They were popular for burying people during the Bronze Age of Crete. The Bronze Age, 3,400 years ago, was when Minoan culture flourished. The Minoans were one of the first truly advanced people of the Mediterranean, especially in Greece. The Minoans buried in this tomb had their long slumber interrupted when the farmer's vehicle caused the roof to cave in. Archaeologists don't know much about the two men buried here. They were likely wealthy, but not royalty-level wealthy. It's one of the few tombs found in Crete that was never pillaged by grave robbers, which excited archaeologists a lot. It was like finding a Christmas advent calendar in July with a few pieces of chocolate still in it. The knife-armed man. 1,500 years ago in Italy, when the Roman Empire had already come crashing down, a man got into an epic fight. It was a battle for survival. He raised his hand to stop whatever weapon was coming towards him, but the mighty blow severed his right hand, cutting it clean off. Nobody knows what happened next, but the man survived. Maybe he beat his attacker back with one hand and a bleeding stump. Without a time machine, I simply can't know all the details, but what I do know is that he should have died from his wound. This man should have died from blood loss or an infection due to the lack of antibiotics. Something as simple as a scratch with a piece of rusty metal could often spell a person's doom in the Middle Ages. But this brave warrior didn't die. He survived and went on to become the knife-armed man. It was like something from Edward Scissorhands, or maybe a really cheesy post-apocalyptic movie. To replace his hand, this guy shoved a dagger onto the stump, turning his arm into a weapon. Archaeologists found the remains of the knife-armed man in a necropolis near Verona. He was buried alongside 200 fellow Italians, along with one headless horse that was likely left as an offering. After his brutal fight, he lived for many decades. Scientists don't think he died until he was around 50 years old. That might not sound like much to you, but it was a big deal in the Middle Ages. Many people were wed by the age of 12, achieved success as adults by 17, and sadly found themselves in the grave by the age of 35. Life in the Middle Ages just hit a little bit harder than it does today. When archaeologists investigated the necropolis, they were shocked to find the knife buckled to the skeleton's arm with decayed leather straps. The man was put to rest inside a tomb by himself, which was already unusual. In most commoner mausoleums from the 6th century, people were piled into tombs like sardines in a can. Whoever this man was must have been well respected, but how he survived without antibiotics and what he did with his knife hand, those secrets are lost to time. The Upshur Bell. In 1944, Newton Anderson was a curious 10-year-old boy. He was at home stuffing coal into the furnace when he dropped a piece of black gold onto the floor. The chunk of coal split in half, revealing something shiny inside. Newton had discovered a bell. a beautiful relic trapped inside a piece of coal from the Carboniferous period. The Carboniferous period was 300 million years ago. So how is it then that the bell little Newton Anderson found was obviously man-made? Human hands crafted this small brass bell with its iron clapper, but humans weren't around 300 million years ago. I mean, that's what I thought. So how did it get trapped in a brick of coal? This is the mystery of the Upshur bell, a mystery that by all accounts is unsolvable. The artifact was found in Upshur County, West Virginia, and many believe it to be proof that everything you have ever seen with your own eyes is a lie. Dinosaurs weren't real, there was no Big Bang, and the world is only about 6,000 years old. Radiocarbon dating is a hoax, and you and I are living in a simulation created by God. Though of course that's only one view, the creationist view. It's not a view that everyone subscribes to. Another theory to explain the mystery bell is that it was crafted by a race of advanced humans, or maybe clever reptiles, who lived 300 million years ago. The rest of the evidence of their civilization is long gone, or maybe sealed even deeper beneath our very feet. The most rational geological explanation is that the bells somehow got trapped inside the coal, much more recently, like a concretion. Which explanation makes the most sense to you? If you need a little more information to decide, here it is. At the top of the bell is a mysterious figure that's been the source of much speculation. The figure on the bell looks suspiciously like the Babylonian demon Pazuzu, as seen in the Exorcist movie. The figure on the bell also looks like Garuda from Hindu mythology, and a little like Isis from ancient Egypt. Could this have been a universal god worshipped by a race of beings who lived prior to the dinosaurs? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. The Lewis Chessman. There is one chess set that's more valuable and important than any other, but sadly, it's not a full set. And no, you're not going to be able to buy it after the video and keep it for yourself to impress your friends. The Lewis Chessmen are priceless chess pieces that were discovered sometime before 1831 in the middle of absolutely nowhere. When I say the middle of nowhere, what location comes to mind? If you're thinking of a remote island far off the coast of Scotland, you're right on the money. These beautiful chess pieces were found on the Isle of Lewis, which even today is the middle of nowhere. Very few humans call the island home, and for good reason. It's cold, windy, and there isn't much to do except shear sheep. Although, I guess if you like shearing sheep, the Isle of Lewis is the place for you. The chess pieces include kings, queens, knights, rooks, bishops, and pawns. The whole crew is present, each one carved meticulously from rare walrus tusks and sperm whale teeth. They sure don't make chess pieces like they used to. Even after almost 200 years of being safely preserved by scientists, the experts still don't know much about the Lewis Chessmen. So let's start with the facts that nobody knows. It's unclear who first found the chess pieces. It's also a mystery as to who made them. One of the most popular theories is that they were carved by none other than Margaret the Adroit, the wife of a priest in Iceland during the end of the Viking Age. Margaret was a renowned carver who was commissioned by bishops across the world to make artifacts from ivory. When she was alive, between 1150 and 1200 AD, the Isle of Lewis was a popular trading center. The chess pieces may have come as a gift to somebody who lived on the island and had grown rich from trade. The pieces may have come all the way from Margaret's ivory workshop in Iceland. If you're bored of hearing about nerdy chess pieces, let me spice things up a bit. Researchers believe that the rooks in the set are Viking berserkers. They know this because the rooks are biting their shields, something legendary berserkers were known to do. According to Icelandic folklore, Viking berserkers were as savage as wolves and as strong as bears. They wore no armor when they ran like demons into battle. They were often so frenzied from bloodlust that they bit their shields to keep their rage from spilling over. One more thing, the Lewis chess set might be the first one that ever contained bishops as pieces. And if that's true, this would have been a fundamental change in the game. Now, almost 1,000 years later, and bishops are still being used in the game of chess. The Earth Monster Sculpture. Around 2,800 years ago, one of the most complex societies that ever formed in North America carved a sculpture. This sculpture is baffling because nobody knows what it means. So let's see if you can be the one to solve the mystery. This amazing artifact is called the Earth Monster. That's its whole name, Earth Monster. And trust me, the name is very fitting. It seems to depict a mythological mountain while also showing a cave entrance. It's a literal monster of the earth, yet the sculpture also bears the form of the cross. Even though it was made 800 years before Jesus Christ was born, and long before the cross was used as the symbol of Christianity, here it is. The relic was initially discovered in central Mexico at some point in the 1960s. Nobody knows exactly where it was found or how it happened. The 1960s were rough for archaeologists. It was easier for treasure thieves to pillage artifacts and sell them on the black market than it was for archaeologists to preserve ancient history. Earth Monster was sold into a private collection, and many years later it was seized by antiquities agents in New York. But in 2023, Earth Monster was returned to Mexico. Scholars, archaeologists, and local officials celebrated the homecoming of this great piece of artwork. Getting the thing back to Mexico was no easy task. It required a lot more than a suitcase. This isn't a small artifact, as you can surely tell by the pictures. Earth Monster is over 2,200 pounds, making you wonder how it was ever pillaged in the first place. The sculpture was carved from volcanic rock during the height of the Olmec civilization. The Olmec are one of my favorite ancient cultures of Mesoamerica. They thrived along the Gulf Coast of Mexico well before the rise of the Maya civilization and preceded the Aztec by a considerable amount of time. They are most famous today for the giant head sculptures they left behind. If you're familiar with the giant stone heads of the Olmec, which could be representations of chiefs or gods for all anyone knows today, you can likely see the resemblance. Just look at the stonework of Earth Monster next to an Olmec head. It's uncanny. Expert Mario Cordova said the mountain on Earth Monster was made to resemble the head of a jaguar, with the mysterious cave doubling as the jaguar's open mouth. As for its use, it remains a mystery. Some experts have suggested that the sculpture was used in rituals. Participants of ceremonies may have had to crawl through the opening like they were crawling through the tubes at the old McDonald's play zones. Another suggestion is that the sculpture depicts a real mountain, perhaps a place of great power to the Olmec, but nobody knows which mountain it could be. The Romanov family Easter eggs. Nobody knows what's become of the most valuable Easter eggs in the world. Once possessed by an extinct lineage of Russian royalty, the eggs are now missing. The Romanov family of Imperial Russia started collecting Easter eggs in 1885. The very first collector was Tsar Alexander III. It was the 5th year of his reign, and he wanted something special to surprise his wife, Maria Feodorovna. Maria was a Danish princess before she left Copenhagen and became the Empress of Russia. Alexander reached out to a man whose name you'll find very familiar to make something uniquely beautiful. That man was Peter Carl Fabergé, a master goldsmith from the House of Fabergé. Peter made the very first royal Russian Fabergé egg. While most European royals were having necklaces and diadems made for themselves, Alexander requested something altogether different. Peter crafted a small white enameled egg, and inside was a golden yolk. Then inside the golden yolk was a golden hen sitting on some golden straw. Hidden inside the hen was a beautiful diamond crown that was hardly big enough to fit on your pinky finger. Today, it's worth a staggering amount of money. And here's a little story to show just how valuable these eggs are. In 2010, a man in America was checking out an antique stall when he found a golden egg sitting on a small stand. The egg was encrusted with diamonds and sapphires. When he pushed a button on the egg, the front popped open to show a clock. He purchased the egg for $13,302. His hope was to melt the egg and sell its individual components. But the man who purchased the egg had a difficult time selling it. He kept the egg for 4 years until he realized that he had one of the original Romanov eggs. It's a good thing he didn't melt it down because the egg was valued at $33 million. Whoever sold him the egg at the antique stall must have had a mental breakdown when they learned the egg's value. Can you imagine giving away that much money? The first egg made by Peter is known as the hen egg. In 1897, Tsar Nicholas II gave his wife Alexandra the imperial coronation egg, which took over a year of labor to create. In 1901, Nicholas gave his mother Maria the Gatchina Palace egg. In total, there were 50 eggs that belonged to the Romanov family when their dynasty came crashing down. When Nicholas II was forced to step down from the throne in 1917, Fabergé was working on 2 eggs, but the next year, the Romanovs met their doom at the hands of the Bolsheviks. What became of the imperial eggs in the wake of devastation remains a mystery to this very day. The Bolsheviks' February Revolution led to a man named Vladimir Lenin becoming the supreme leader of Russia. This was the birth of communism and a lot of other crazy stuff that you're sure to learn about in another video. Communism wasn't great for Russia. With the economy tanking in the 1920s, Vladimir Lenin had originally stolen the eggs from the deceased Romanovs and stashed them at the Kremlin in Moscow. But with the economic depression, they started selling the eggs to anyone with enough cash. Russia put on a yard sale of all its most precious cultural relics, and the world pulled over to do some shopping. Today, there are only 10 eggs left at the Kremlin. 9 are in St. Petersburg at the Fabergé Museum. 5 are at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. 3 are in London and 2 are in Washington, D.C. There are also 2 in Baltimore and 1 in Cleveland. 8 of the eggs are missing, and they've never been seen by the public. These are the most elite artifacts in the world. One of them is the 1889 Necessaire egg. It was only seen by a handful of people in London in 1949, and then it disappeared. Leonardo da Vinci's notebooks. Sure, Leonardo da Vinci painted the Mona Lisa and the Last Supper, but did you know that he only has 22 paintings on display across the globe? It's more paintings than most people create in their lives, but compared to other artists in the Renaissance during the 15th and 16th centuries, the number is surprisingly low. The truth is that Leonardo engaged in too many projects just to focus on art. Nothing encapsulates Leonardo da Vinci's genius quite like his surviving notebooks. These artifacts contain the original scientific observations of one of Italy's greatest minds, and the world's greatest minds. The notebooks hold designs for machines that still baffle scientists. The seeds of modern technology are in these old rustic pages, but just what exactly is hiding in Leonardo's notebooks? Leonardo was obsessed with geometry, patterns, math, and the proportions of the human body. One of his notebooks contains the legendary Vitruvius Man, drawn in 1487. Leonardo was inspired by the ancient Roman architect Vitruvius. Underneath sketches of the human form, Leonardo left notes only he could read. When you were a kid, did you come up with a secret language that only you and your best friends could understand? If you did, you have more in common with Leonardo da Vinci than you might realize. He created his own form of writing so that other people couldn't decipher his notebooks. He wrote secrets of the universe backward in what's known as mirror writing. That's really hard. Have you ever tried writing backwards? Or as if you were writing in a mirror? That takes talent. Leonardo believed that every part of the body was mathematically in proportion with every other part of the body. For example, 4 fingers equaled the length of a single palm. 4 palms were the length of a foot, and 24 palms would equal the height of a man. These aren't accurate by any means, but Leonardo was convinced. He believed that the human body was a reflection of the universe. The notebooks include too many ingenious inventions to include in a single video, but I will tell you about one amazing proposal from 1502. Leonardo came up with a design for a bridge that would span the Golden Horn in Istanbul, over 900 feet in length with an arch that ships could still pass beneath. Ottoman ruler Sultan Bayezid II thought it was a crazy idea and turned down Leonardo, but modern architects would finally complete the design 499 years later in 2001. How was Leonardo so far ahead of his time? The Dashka Stone. Of all of the strange stones that have ever been found, none is more controversial perhaps than the Dashka Stone. It's believed to be a map that was made 120 million years ago by the architect of Earth. The Dashka Stone was found in Russia in 1999. Experts in Russia who have thoroughly studied it believe it's evidence of an ancient civil engineering project. The stone map shows the Ural Mountains, where the artifact was found, and about 12,000 kilometers of channels and dams. The map also includes what appear to be hieroglyphic notations that are written in an unknown language. The hundreds of lines are supposedly accurate from a topographical standpoint, and that means that the map must have been made from an aerial observation. The accuracy and perspective suggest that whoever carved this thing had been given an aerial view of the world. An aerial view of the world 120 million years ago seems impossible. Humans didn't even exist yet, so how could a human have carved such a stone? The artifact was studied by archaeologists at Bashkir State University. Professor Alexander Chuvirov was the leader of the team, and also the one behind naming the stone. The story behind it is actually pretty adorable. On the day of the stone's discovery, his granddaughter was born. So Alexander named the rock Dashka after her. After years of research, Alexander and his team are certain that the stone did not originate in nature. It's composed of 3 separate layers. The first layer is thick cement, then there's a layer of diopside glass enriched with silicone, and the last layer is only millimeters thick, made of calcium porcelain. The last layer was likely put in place to protect the giant stone from damage, kind of like laminating a sheet of paper. The calcium porcelain would also have diffused light to help illuminate the stone's surface. This is extremely impressive technology for being 120 million years old. You know, from a time when dinosaurs were still alive. The Dashka stone, almost without a doubt, points to a civilization in the Ural Mountains of Russia that was extremely advanced. They were advanced enough to see the world from the sky and to shape the very landscape. But when they existed is still up for debate. Scientists at the university only suggested 120 million years for the date of creation because of an ancient seashell embedded in the Dashka stone surface. That seashell could have become embedded in the stone at any point. More recent estimates place the slab at about 3,000 years old. What do you think about this stone? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're at it, be sure to subscribe. Stone Age sculptures. Since 2014, over 100 peculiar flint artifacts have been uncovered from a Stone Age village in the Middle East. Scientists can't decide if these striking artifacts are the earliest sculptures of humans ever made, or if they're just one big coincidence. Take a look at these figures and let me know what you think. If you ask me, they do look like tiny human figurines. You can clearly see the head, the protrusions where the arms would be, and then a large bottom section. Either these are human sculptures or they're figures of snowmen. It's tough to say. But what's really interesting is where the artifacts were found. Scientists at the Fontanals Institution for Humanities Research in Spain began their excavations at the Karaissin site in Jordan. Karaissin was an ancient settlement that was occupied about 11,000 years ago by a group who were previously thought of as hunter-gatherers. However, new research has shown that the ancient hunters were slowly transitioning from nomadic life to living in a settlement and farming. Karaissin is one of the oldest villages in the world that contains houses. Just think of how big of a deal that is. Imagine standing in the ruins of one of the first places where a house was built. The history here is rich, and that's what makes the figurines so exciting. Researcher Juan José Ibáñez said the figurines share a distinctive shape. They were found while excavating funerary areas, meaning prehistoric cemeteries. The artifacts don't look anything like tools that were used by people in 9000 BC. They don't show any signs of wear from being used. So they must have been decorative or symbolic. Most researchers are convinced that these were the earliest human figurines ever carved, or at least the oldest figurines that have ever been found. The flint artifacts could be the first dolls and action figures ever made. The wheel. In 2008, evidence of a wheel from 300 million years ago was uncovered inside a Ukrainian coal mine. It was found in such a precarious location, embedded in a chunk of sandstone, that it couldn't be removed. As far as anyone knows, the potential evidence of an advanced civilization is still down in the coal mine. Workers were drilling at a depth of almost 3,000 feet, but work came to a standstill when one of the men discovered an imprint of a wheel above their heads. It was stamped into the sandstone roof of the tunnel that had just been excavated. And there, above them, was the outline of something that looked almost like a chariot wheel. I don't think I need to explain the implications of a chariot wheel being discovered 3,000 feet beneath the surface of the Earth. It's a big deal. The bummer is that the imprint couldn't be removed, like I already said. But there are pictures of it that you and I can gawk at and make speculations about. Just take a look at these photos taken by Deputy Chief V.V. Cruzillan that he shared with the foreman of the mine. Don't the photos show what clearly looks like a wagon wheel, complete with spokes? Maybe the impression of the wheel is from a fossilized wagon that was built by a prehistoric society of bird-like creatures. Or maybe the wheel imprint was left by a piece of technology from a human civilization that flourished 300 million years ago. Nobody has the answers, so sadly there's only speculation. But still, the wheel imprint is yet another piece of evidence that history is much more complicated. Or there are just some crazy things happening with rocks and geology that we really just don't appreciate. Saint Cecilia's incorruptible body. Saint Cecilia is one of the most important ancient Roman saints. She also might be proof that the bodies of saints hold supernatural powers. Cecilia was born in the Roman Empire around the year 200 AD. According to legend, Cecilia was married off by her parents to a nobleman who didn't share her Christian values. Even though Cecilia took a vow of celibacy, her parents shipped her to a strange Roman man. How cute! She thought she had a choice and could make her own decisions. Her parents were probably wondering where the heck she got those crazy ideas into her head. Her husband's name was Valerian, just like from Game of Thrones. When the two were alone after their wedding and the marriage was to be consummated, Cecilia said an angel was watching over her. If Valerian did anything untoward, he would be punished mercilessly. Presented with such a conundrum and flushed by his raging hormones, Valerian asked to see the angel. But Cecilia said that the only way he would see the angelic being was if he went and got baptized by Pope Urban I. Feeling a little frustrated, Valerian agreed to be baptized. And legend has it that afterward, he did see the angel standing beside Cecilia, protecting her from his animal advances. Being a perfect gentleman, Valerian refrained from any inappropriate behavior and lived happily with his new wife. Happily, maybe, but not for long. Valerian and his brother were soon martyred for being baptized, and Cecilia followed. What happened to her was utterly horrible. The Romans tried to take her head off with a sword, but it didn't work. She was hit 3 times on the neck with a sharp blade, but still lived for another 3 days. Upon her death, she was buried in the catacomb of Calixtus, one of the most important burial grounds in Rome. Between the 2nd and 4th centuries, it was the exclusive burial place for the popes of the church. Cecilia would later be transferred to her very own tomb within the Church of Saint Cecilia in Trastevere. You're likely waiting for the mysterious artifact to come into play, so I won't disappoint. Cecilia herself is the unexplainable artifact. As of 1599, her body was still incorrupt. That means it hadn't decayed like it should have. Even after being dead for over 1,000 years, her body never rotted. It didn't stay preserved in the way mummies are preserved when left in crypts or in harsh deserts. Cecilia's body remained completely undamaged. It looked as if she were simply sleeping, as if Cecilia were taking an extraordinarily long nap. But is it true, and is there any proof? Nobody is willing to desecrate her tomb in order to find out. The last thing the church wants to do is exhume the body of a saint for scientific research. So we'll probably never know. The Forgotten Stone. I want you to look at what's probably the most depressing ancient monument you've ever seen. I mean it, this thing is in a weird spot. Surrounded by trash cans, housing units, and what appear to be some abandoned grocery carts. The stone was built 4,000 years ago and is protected by some rusting iron bars, situated next to a block of apartments in Edinburgh, Scotland. All you can really do is shake your head and wonder what the ancient Druids would say if they could see the stone now. It's almost as old as the pyramids of Egypt, yet its history is far more mysterious. The chunk of grey sandstone is about 7 feet tall, one of many forgotten megaliths spread across Edinburgh. However, it's the only one sitting in the middle of a residential apartment block. Historic Environment Scotland called it a nationally important monument that was used in a prehistoric ritual. But that's where the information ends. When the neighborhood was being built, surely somebody recognized the stone's importance and kept it. It makes you wonder how many other stones were standing here before the concrete was poured and picket fences were built. The forgotten stone was part of a mystical landscape that's never going to be seen again. The strangest spheres. You and I have explored some unusual things today, including artifacts that date back millions of years. Now it's time to look at the oldest unexplainable artifact that have ever been found. The Klerksdorp spheres were excavated from rock that's 3 billion years old. Each one of these incredible spheres looks kind of like a walnut. Each one is the size of a cricket ball, pulled from ancient pyrophyllite deposits in South Africa. Upon their discovery in the 1980s, speculation ran wild. The scientific community became obsessed with the spheres, which you can surely understand being an enthusiast of all things strange yourself. Some experts thought that the spheres were proof of a civilization that existed before the biblical flood. Others took it even further back, to the creation of Earth itself. They suggested that there was a civilization that lived on the planet before the first tree had roots. The reason people were so obsessed with the spheres can be seen in these photos. Each sphere has a series of perfectly straight lines around its circumference, looking as if they were machined. The seams look like what you'd find on something like a baseball straight out of the factory. Considering the spheres were lodged in rock from 3 billion years ago, many pseudoscientists hailed them as proof of an ancient alien visit. Even ordinary scientists got caught up in the commotion. In 2006, respected geologist Bruce Cairncross said he believed the mystery spheres to be the remnants of an alien spaceship. As for what mainstream scientists have to say now, I'm sure you can already guess. They claim the Klerksdorp spheres are nothing even remotely unusual. The spheres are concretions, elliptical objects made from precipitation and a lot of time. I don't want to burst anyone's bubble because I love the idea of weird or lost ancient alien technology being found, but the science backs up the concretion theory. The spheres are definitely weird, but they could be completely natural.
Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
The Sword in the Lake. You've heard of the legendary King Arthur pulling a sword from a stone, but have you heard the amazing story of the 8-year-old girl who recently pulled an ancient sword from a lake? This happened in Sweden when a girl named Saga Vanasek was playing in a lake and stepped on something. At first, she thought it was a stick, but when she picked it up, she realized she had a sword in her hands. She waved it in the air and called her father, saying, "Daddy, I found a sword!" After contacting the authorities, archaeologists came down and did a bit of investigating. The local museum got involved, and they soon estimated that the sword was probably from the 5th or 6th century AD, making it at least 1,000 years old. The sword could have even been made 1,500 years ago. Researchers from the Jönköpings Landsmuseum in Sweden have no idea why the sword was in the lake. Perhaps it was during a winter trek, or perhaps some warrior was buried in the lake, or it was some sort of sacrifice. Archaeologists and historians are now combing the lake for more historic finds. So far, they have found a brooch from the same time period as the sword. Researchers are now saying that the lake could be a time-worn place of sacrifice, and that there could even be ancient Viking graves under or around the lake yet to be discovered. When news of the sword broke, people on social media started calling her the Queen of Sweden. Fate has called it. One Twitter user said her name Saga is also perfect. She will most likely get a saga written about her called The Saga of Saga. Headless statues. 2 mysterious headless statues have recently been found in an ancient Greek burial site dating back to the 4th century BC. The Greek Ministry of Culture and Sports announced in a recent statement that the strange headless statue of a woman and her servant, also headless, were found prior to the construction of a new town hall in the east of Athens. What's really mysterious about these statues is that they probably marked a very important person's grave, but scientists and archaeologists have no idea whose it is. Even more mysterious is why the statues don't have heads. Grave monuments back in ancient Greece almost always portrayed the deceased with faces, usually with idealized faces, immortalizing the dead in a more flattering way than they looked in real life. Professor Olga Pelagia says that typical grave monuments of that time depicted family gatherings or dead masters and mistresses with their slaves, and children would be accompanied by pets. Luxurious monuments like this were outlawed in 317 BC. Even though there isn't much known about the woman and her servant, she's still of great importance, and her headless monument and that of her servant have been taken to Greece's Archaeological Museum of Braron for studying and safekeeping. Unique Maya mask. A Maya mask as tall as a person has been uncovered in Yucatan, Mexico. What's really mysterious about this is that the giant mask depicts the face of a deity or perhaps an elite person, completely unknown to historians and researchers. The mask was crafted from stucco and dates back to the late pre-classic period, sometime between 300 BC and 250 AD. After its original discovery in 2017, Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History worked tirelessly to restore the mask to its previous glory. When it was originally made, the Maya mask would have been brightly colored, and it would have represented either a prominent member of society or a deity. But it's strange because there have been many of these masks discovered before, and researchers almost always recognize who they were made to depict. This particular mask is a complete enigma. It is the first one found in this particular location, and archaeologists have taken it out and restored it a couple of times, always reburying it in its original location for the time being. They are trying to make sure the mask is preserved at the site for the future, because this site does not yet have legal protection. The Ica Stones. A very interesting collection of unique artifacts is actually housed in a small private museum created by a Peruvian physician, Dr. Javier Cabrera. These are known as the Ica Stones, and they were added to the physician's collection in 1966. There are over 10,000 within the collection, each one slightly different than the last, and each carved with mysterious images of a civilization lost in time. The stones are covered with carvings of dinosaurs, other extinct animals, maps of unknown places, and even advanced surgical methods unknown to humans back when these stones were supposedly carved thousands of years ago. As the story goes, these stones turned up randomly on the property of a farmer in Peru who brought them to Dr. Cabrera after being ignored by the archaeological authorities back in the 60s. Over several years of digging, the physician allegedly uncovered all 10,000 of the stones. Many ancient astronaut theorists and creationists argue that these stones prove that humans at one point coexisted with dinosaurs. The BBC actually did a special on these stones back in 1973 and were able to interview the farmer that supposedly found them. He eventually admitted that he carved the stones himself and then artificially aged them. However, many people believe the story to be true and justify it by saying that there is no way one person could carve 10,000 stones in such a short amount of time. No one has been able to solve that part of the mystery, and you can actually go see these stones at the museum and decide for yourself. The Jomon artifacts. Some of the most curious artifacts ever found in Japan are known as the Jomon artifacts, or the Dogu clay figurines. These artifacts date back to the Jomon period, which lasted between 10,000 BC and 300 BC. This was a prehistoric time in Japan's history, back when ceramic art was thriving amongst early Japanese people. The figures have been found all over Japan, from the north to the south, but the strange thing about them is that some people believe they resemble aliens. There are multiple theories on what the peculiar figurines were used for, with the most popular theory being that they were tokens of good health or safe childbirth. As many were excavated in fragments, it's believed that after the wish was fulfilled, the dogu was broken and thrown away. Another theory is that these were goddesses to whom Jomon people prayed to for health and food. Many have been found in grave circles or stone circles, indicating some spiritual inclination that evolved over time. Other explanations are children's toys, funerary offerings, or objects used in some kind of ritual. But some people have said that they appear to be wearing spacesuits. Some of them have giant goggle eyes that are certainly not human, and it's hard to believe that 10,000 years ago the Japanese were making up clay figurines based on science fiction stories being told around the fire. So, conclusion, they saw aliens. Other similar clay figurines have been found made by other cultures around the world, such as the Venus of Willendorf, that also appear to depict rounded, human-like figures. Offerings to the gods. Archaeologists have recently unearthed a mysterious artifact in Mexico, this time underwater in Veracruz. The corn-shaped artifact was made sometime between 900 BC and 400 BC and is made from a substance known as jadeite, which is a material harder than steel. It has unique designs that archaeologists describe as a corn cob cut in an abstract way. A diver with an archaeological diving project found the artifact in a deep stream. The mysterious artifact comes from the ancient Olmec civilization. According to Carl Wendt, a professor at California State University, the artifact was probably used as a symbol of power and authority by being attached to the staff of a prominent member of society. Wendt also believes that the artifact, as such a powerful symbol, was probably thrown into the stream as an offering to the ancient gods of the Olmec. The stream and water in general was sacred and connected to deities. Where the object was found is a place where fresh water intersects with salt water, and it may have been an area of great importance. Hongshan Pig Dragon. The Hongshan artifacts were crafted by Neolithic people who lived in the northeast part of China between the years 4700 BC and 2900 BC. The Hongshan culture is known for their craftsmanship, temples, pyramids, and for their mysterious artifacts made of jade that appear to depict aliens. In this ancient civilization, jade was considered a sacred stone, meaning that anything made from jade was highly valued. These strange artifacts, which were discovered throughout the years inside various tombs, depict strange creatures, almost from a fantasy. Researchers believe they depict just that, mythological creatures such as the Uruboro, a dragon pig that bites its own tail. Some are C-shaped and most likely represent the wish for fertility, since the society was largely dependent on agriculture. Some argue that they should be called the bear dragon instead of the pig dragon because bears were worshipped by ancient people of the area. The animal could also represent an animal embryo, a primal life force representing vitality. Fun fact, a jade figure from the Hongshan dynasty was estimated at around $5,000, and it sold for $2.295 million. Apparently, for an authentic, historically significant artifact, $2 million's a bargain. Stone tongue. It's one thing to find artifacts carved from precious rock, but what about an artifact stuffed inside of a person's mouth to replace their tongue? In England, a very unique skeleton dated to be around 1700 years old has been found with his tongue missing and a stone wedged inside his mouth. The bizarre remains date back to a time when England was integrated into the Roman Empire. This particular man was found buried with his face down, a position that was reserved primarily for deviants. It was a type of burial only given to those who deserved to be humiliated in death. However, the rock artifact inside the dead man's mouth is a total anomaly. According to Simon Mays, one of the researchers at the original dig site in Stanwick, says that even after investigating at least 600 bodies being buried face down at over 250 grave sites, no other skeleton has been found with a stone in place of their tongue. Nobody is 100% sure what happened to the poor guy, but the general consensus is that he probably had his tongue cut out as some sort of punishment, then a rock stuffed in his mouth as the icing on the cake for whatever kind of horrible thing he did. The man then died from an infection caused by the amputation and was given a deviant burial with the rock still in his mouth. The Denmark spirals. Archaeologists in 2015 dug up 2,000 tiny golden spirals made from thin filaments in a field in Denmark, and still have no idea what they were used for. The coils date back from between 900 to 700 BC, and a top researcher from the National Museum in Copenhagen claims that the golden spirals may have been part of a set of robes for a priest king. Either that, or they may have been strips of gold prepared to be woven into cloth for someone very important. However, it's still unclear how exactly the spirals of gold got lost and buried inside of a field, and more information won't come to light until archaeologists are able to continue digging in the area to bring up even more treasure. These spirals came from an area rich in Bronze Age artifacts. Over the past 200 years, people have found gold cups and rings, along with the remains of a fur-lined box. This indicates that the coils may have been a collection of cult objects used to worship the sun. Golan Heights. Golan Heights is actually part artifact and part monument. It's a truly remarkable Stonehenge-type mystery located in the Middle East that went unnoticed for centuries. It was sitting in a barren field and wasn't officially discovered until 1967, when archaeologists checking out an aerial survey noticed the strange pattern of stone circles in the middle of nowhere. Israel captured the territory from Syria in 1967 during a war, and it is known as Rum el-Hiri in Arabic, which means the stone heap of the wildcat. Upon further inspection, it turned out that the ancient artifact was really a collection of stones placed in an odd circular pattern, up to 500 feet wide with a burial chamber in its core. From a distance, it looks like a labyrinth of crumbling stone walls, but from above, it looks like a bullseye. According to most estimates, Golan Heights is around 5,000 years old, about the same as Stonehenge in England. It's made of thousands of tiny basalt rocks that, when combined, weigh over 40,000 tons. Of course, the big mystery here is that nobody has any idea who built the structure. Most of the civilizations were nomadic and wouldn't have had a need for such a grand burial mound. It also could have had an astrological significance. On the shortest and longest days of the year, the June and December solstices, the sun lines up with openings in the rock. Shards of pottery and flint tools have been found in several excavations of the site. Construction probably began in 3500 BC, with other parts getting added to it over the next 2,000 years. The burial chamber in the center is about 20 feet deep, but whoever was laid to rest is long gone. The area is now part of a complex used for training Israel's military, but visitors can still come to explore the walls and crawl into the chamber. Skull helmets. While excavating some 2,100-year-old burial mounds at a site in Selangor, Ecuador between 2014 and 2016, archaeologists unearthed the skeletons of 2 infants who were laid to rest wearing helmets made from the skulls of older children. The ancient ritual complex where they were buried belonged to the Guangala culture, and the children died around 100 BC. One died at around 18 months old and wore the skull of a child who passed away when they were between 4 and 12 years old. The other infant died between 6 and 9 months old and wore the skull of a child between 2 and 12 years old. Perhaps most disturbingly, archaeologists said that the older kids' skulls likely still had flesh on them when they were affixed to the infant skulls, as the bare bones of such young people likely would not hold together on their own. A study detailing the findings describes the infants' burials as the only known case of anyone ever using juvenile crania as mortuary headgear. Many unanswered questions surround the skull helmets, but for now, researchers theorize that the helmets may have been meant to protect the baby's souls. They hope to get closer to the bottom of the issue by performing DNA and isotope analysis on the bones. The children were excavated along with 9 other individuals, several who were buried with figurines, shells, and various other small objects. Tomb full of soup bowls. In late 2017, news broke of the discovery of a 3,100-year-old tomb in Baoji City in China's Shaanxi province. Called Tomb M4, inside were various bronze soup bowls and other food vessels covered in intricate designs, as well as an unidentified person's badly decomposed remains. One of the most unique artifacts is a 4-handled soup bowl covered in 192 spikes and decorated with dragons, birds, and bovines. Researchers also found 2 deer-shaped wine vessels. All these items were considered ritualistic, meaning that they would have been used in religious ceremonies or funerals. The team of archaeologists who found the tomb published their findings, guessing that the occupant of Tomb M4 was most likely of elite status and could potentially be a high-ranking chief or the spouse of a chief. The researchers explained that the vessels in M4 may have been war spoils honoring the deceased individual. It's believed that the person buried in the tomb was from the Zhou dynasty. When they died, the Zhou were battling the Shang and would eventually emerge victorious. Some of the tomb's vessels contain inscriptions indicating that they may have been stolen from the Shang and put into the grave. Throughout the excavations, at least 56 other tombs were discovered nearby. This is all thanks to construction workers who were building houses in the area and came upon some bronze vessels. As you know, some of the most amazing discoveries happen by accident. Burnt city burials. Over the past 40 years or so, archaeologists have unearthed more than 1,200 burials at the ancient site of Shar-e-Sokhta, or the Burnt City in Iran. A few specific burials dating back 2,800 years ago stand out among the rest. One was a grave in the shape of a circle with the skeletal remains of an adult man, along with 2 dog skulls situated above his head, and 12 human skulls on the other side of the grave. Another burial held the bones of a 25 to 30-year-old man whose head was placed at his lower right side with 2 daggers. The tools may have been used to behead the man, who was perhaps executed for committing some sort of offense, according to project director Sayed Mansour Sajadi. These graves appear to be unique, with no others like them being found so far. They raise numerous questions, including why these people were buried the way that they were, and why are they so close together, with skulls of some mixed with remains from others? Whatever it is, archaeologists have no idea. The Burnt City dates back some 5,200 years. It's one of the most significant Bronze Age sites in Iran and the Middle East, having once served as a major trade center of the ancient world. Thousands of artifacts have been found there, with these bizarre burials constituting some of the strangest finds so far. Fossilized beasts. Between 11 and 12 million years ago, the Texas coastal plain was filled with huge exotic animals unlike anything seen in North America today, including rhinos, antelopes with horns like a slingshot, and even camels. A genus of elephant-like beasts called gomphotheres with tusks, trunks, and shovel-like jaws also roamed the region. Thousands of fossils of these Miocene creatures were unearthed during the Great Depression era between 1939 and 1941, when the U.S. government put men to work excavating and building all over the place. In addition to these animals, these bone hunters also found the oldest American alligator fossils on record and remains of an extinct dog relative. Scientists began studying the fossils in depth in recent years, bringing them out of storage finally, and have learned that the region once resembled the modern-day Serengeti ecosystem in Africa. A 2019 study examined bones found at 4 sites near what is now Beeville, Texas. As part of their work, researchers returned to some of the sites and retrieved even more fossils that previous workers overlooked while searching for bigger and more obvious bones. There are also 86 fossils encased in plaster that were found in the original excavations and which have yet to be studied. The team hopes to conduct isotope analysis on them to determine the animals' diets and glean other details about how they lived. Unusual figurine. Archaeologists have found a one-of-a-kind figurine wearing a feather headdress at a prehistoric burial site in Novosibirsk, Russia. Discovered among several other artifacts, the statue was made of an unidentified material. It appears to wear a feathered headpiece, which is not typical of artifacts found in Siberia, and researchers are kind of confused. Is it feathers, or is it a halo? For now, they are trying to determine the origins and story behind the figurine. The team also found a bird figurine made from bone, which was likely a pendant or sewn onto clothing, according to excavation leader Dr. Natalia Basova, who spoke with the Siberian Times. The figurines have holes in them to either wear as a necklace or sewn onto your clothes because back then it was kind of the only way to take small and valuable things with you. She described additional finds including 4 anthropomorphic figurines made from mammoth tusk, sandstone, birch burl, and an unknown organic material. They are also trying to figure out what the material is. The experts also found a moose figurine made from shale, which was likely used for ritualistic purposes. In male burials, they unearthed belt buckles made from bone and small sculptures. The site dates back at least as far back as the 3rd millennium BC, but it may be even older, with some artifacts perhaps dating to the 4th millennium BC. Untangling the site's past is proving to be a complex task due to a tsunami that washed over the soil around 4,000 years ago and a modern potato farm that further disturbed the grounds. Archaeologists think that it's possible the figurines come from the Krotovo culture, but the quality and beauty of the figurines are worthy of being in a museum for everyone to enjoy. Stone sculpture. While plowing his field in 2019, a Newton Grove, North Carolina resident named Tom Giddens discovered a bizarre stone sculpture bearing a face that has experts stumped. Archaeologist Mary Beth Fitz described the object to CBS 17, stating, "It really is mysterious. We don't know what time period it's from. It could be a piece of folk art, or it could have been made a long time ago. It's made of sandstone, and that's a pretty soft stone, so you don't need special tools to carve sandstone, so that means it really could have been carved any time in history." Giddens decided to keep the artifact, but while she was examining it, Fitz took the opportunity to create a 3D model of the sculpture. She hopes to learn more about the object through a member of the public who recognizes it, or from someone who ends up discovering a similar artifact. So keep your eyes open for any information and be sure to share if you know anything. Tattooed Ice Maiden. Nicknamed the Siberian Ice Maiden, a 2,500-year-old mummy tells the story of a woman who died in her 20s during the 5th century BC. She was discovered in 1993 on an icy plateau in eastern Russia's Altai Mountains, where she has been laid to rest beneath another grave. The burial above her was looted at some point, but thankfully the Ice Maiden went unnoticed until archaeologists found her. Hailing from the Pazyryk culture, the Ice Maiden stood at 5.5 feet tall, which was taller than the average person of her time. She was found laying on her side inside a wooden coffin, wearing white stockings, a white skirt with maroon stripes, and a yellow Chinese silk blouse. In an interview with The Independent, Dr. Natalia Polozmak from the Russian Academy of Sciences explained that the blouse had been repaired several times, as silk was a rare and prized commodity. The woman's burial was surrounded by 6 horses, indicating that she was an elite member of her society. She was so well preserved, her tattoos of deer and snow leopards were still visible. Water had seeped into her tomb and frozen her into a block of ice, keeping her in remarkably good shape over the many centuries since her death. Archaeologists poured hot water over the woman to melt the ice, and in the process, her skin darkened. Experts spent years working to restore her as close to the state she was found in as possible, and to learn more about her life and death. They are still not entirely sure why she died, but they discovered signs that the woman experienced a sudden illness before her death. MRI scans showed that she most likely suffered from breast cancer. She also had a bone infection and bore injuries indicating she had fallen. This could possibly explain a container of material found in the Ice Maiden's grave, which scientists believe could have been marijuana that she used for relief from her ailments. Biblical rock etchings. In a southwestern corner of Israel's Negev desert on Mount Karkam near Egypt's Sinai Peninsula is a barren plateau filled with petroglyphs and ancient stone tools. Sitting 2,780 feet above sea level, the plateau's history of human habitation may date as far back as 400,000 years. Today, the environment is harsh and unforgiving, but back then it was lusher, greener, and more hospitable overall. It served as a good vantage point for scoping out animals to hunt in the forest below, an activity that was still going on as recently as 17,000 years ago. Professor Emmanuel Anati, who spoke with the Israel Times, discovered these artifacts in 1954, before returning there numerous times starting in 1980 to conduct additional excavations with colleagues. Altogether, he identified 300 Paleolithic or early Stone Age sites on the mountain containing as many as 40,000 rock engravings dating as far back as 7,000 years. Anati also identified at least 100 geoglyphs, which are so large they are only recognizable from an aerial point of view. The rock engravings depict animals, humans, footprints, and various scenes, including images of people with their arms raised in prayer, and scenes that strike researchers as having biblical overtones. Some even believe that Mount Karkam is the location the Bible's writers were thinking about when they talked of Mount Sinai, but this suspicion remains unproven. Over half the rock images are of ibexes, demonstrating the animal's significance to the culture that created the artwork. Experts speculate that it may have symbolized a resurrected god, a life and death cycle, or fertility of the soil, but they don't know for sure. Chiquihuite Cave. Researchers seeking to learn what the ancient climate was like in the high desert mountains of north-central Mexico instead discovered what they believe is evidence of early human occupation, with the potential to drastically alter the historical narrative of the Americas. At the site, known as Chiquihuite Cave, the team found thousands of ancient artifacts, including projectile points, that are believed to date as far back as 30,000 years. Because the objects are made from a type of limestone that does not occur naturally in the cave, researchers believe it was transported there by humans. If proven to be true, the collection would represent the oldest known evidence of a human presence in the Americas. Oddly, however, no human or animal remains were found at the site. Human DNA was detected, but the team admittedly was unsure whether it was left by ancient humans or if someone working there had accidentally contaminated the scene. Today, Chiquihuite Cave is situated in an environment too hostile for anyone to reasonably believe humans could or would want to live there. But at the time the alleged stone tools were created, the area was much greener. When the first inhabitants of the Americas arrived has long been a source of contention among experts, with the most favored theory holding that people first came around 13,500 years ago. As more discoveries are made, that date keeps getting pushed further back, with the Chiquihuite Cave pushing the debate to its limit thus far. Some scientists reject the newly proposed idea that humans may have arrived in the Americas 30,000 years ago, because it predates the existence of the Bering Land Bridge that many researchers believe people used to get there in the first place. One thing remains certain: it will take quite some time for experts to fully disentangle the mysteries behind who got to the Americas first, and they may not ever find the answer. Muscular woman. Nearly 6,000 years ago, a mysterious woman lived and died in what is now Nicaragua. A team of archaeologists found her remains near the country's Caribbean coastline just a few years ago. This was a rare surprise, as human remains typically do not remain intact in the tropical region. Because she was buried in a shell mound, which reduced the soil's acidity, the woman was better preserved than usual. The researchers discovered the remains in a place called the Angie site, which was originally excavated in the 1970s. Apparently, the original team had missed the woman, who was buried 7.5 feet below the ground surface. She was laid to rest in a shallow oval pit, with her knees drawn toward her stomach and her arms at her sides. The woman died between 25 and 40 years old. She was petite, standing at just under 5 feet tall. Not only are these the oldest human remains found in lower Central America, something about the lady stood out to scientists. Her forearms were extremely muscular, despite her small stature. This may have been from rowing or some other physical activity, according to study leader Mirjana Roksandic. Rowing is common in the area to this day, where people often travel by boat. The woman's teeth show wear and tear from eating shellfish, which is also still common among modern locals. Little is known about Lower Central America's indigenous cultures, given the scarcity of human remains there. More research is necessary to determine her identity or anything significant about her life or burial. Thanks for watching! Which discovery was your favorite? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you next time. Bye!